get started here. We report August 2nd, then start August 3rd with our first practice.
Take to Murfreesboro on a Saturday. Let me watch them play.
Football season coming up, and you guys kind of work your way through some football questions with Chris and what the season's going to be like. Jonathan, you're in the leadoff spot here next to Chris, so go right ahead.
Football's different. That's what I'm eager to talk about. Man, I don't know what the future and the horizon looks like 5 years from now for college football. I know that middle's in a good spot because I look at the renovations that are coming, the enhancement to the campus, the emphasis on community, and getting people back together at the stadium and making that an emphasis during COVID. I know that Murfreesboro is a great spot to get your family together in that area and go see college football. As far as, Chip, where we're headed, it is a blank canvas because Stock mentioned it earlier. Guys, we're not anywhere close to being done with conference realignment and everything else, and
No doubt.
I think there's a lot of positioning involved with all of this.
I agree with you. I mean, it's, for what we do as sports talk hosts, it obviously gives us a lot to talk about, but at the same time, there's so much uncertainty because, college sports has changed so much in the last 10 years, 20 years that, you don't really know what it's going to look like 2 years from now, let alone 5 or 10. And in some ways that's exciting. In some ways that's scary. I don't envy Chris and his job at all of trying to navigate those waters or Stock, because it changes every day. And like I said, for us, that might be good because it's something to talk about. But for you all, I know it's a lot.
Well, I can just listen to your shows. I can just listen to your shows and find out what's happening.
That's very true.
Well, my thing is, I'm a football purist. Let everybody else swallow each other. Let the league swallow each other. And I was telling Chris this earlier. I just want to see football. I'm going to go to Murfreesboro and watch MTSU play. Thank you. It's great. The NIL, they're getting paid. They're making. I love it. I love the kids getting played. I played in college. I was terrible. I love these kids getting to play and getting paid. I love all that. But at some point, I get tired of all the what's Oklahoma going to do in Clemson. Just take me to Murfreesboro on a Saturday. Let me watch them play. To me, it's football is football. Bear Bryant said football comes down to two things. It's about blocking and tackling. You do that, you win games. I want to see blocking and tackling. So I want to see football. So I'm more focused on what is in my backyard than what I could see on ESPN on Saturday night. I'm different.
Amen to that.
And Chip, the other thing, you asked us how we're gearing up for football. There's really not much to gear up for. I can tell you that Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are likely going to be in the college football playoff, and it's July 20th. I mean, 3 of the 4 teams are pretty much set before they even kick the football off at SEC Media Days this week. We've been covering that. We're talking about conference realignment because we already know the cream of the crop right now and how things line up.
Chris, when you're not listening to Joe in the morning and Chase in the midday and Jonathan in the afternoon, how much of your day do you spend in thought about where realignment's going and just kind of thinking, because you're pretty analytical with things like that, and if this could happen and that could happen, but you've got it. You can't not think about it.
Yeah, Chip, it really depends on the day, but I would say about half the day. You're talking to somebody or you're answering questions about it or you're trying to search for information and those kind of things. And I would like to reiterate what was said is that we've got the best corner on the market. We're right here on Nashville's doorstep. We've got location. So I think our future is going to be great. We're going to add some facilities to it. We've got a great academic program. We've got a great university. So all those factors kind of insulate you from this. When conference expansion happens, the bad part of it is it feels like a rapture moment. And you saw it with the Pac-12 just recently. All of a sudden, Oregon and Washington and Stanford are having to answer questions like, where are you going to go? Are you the ones going to be left behind? What happens with the ones that are left behind and those kind of things? So I'm really glad that it appears on the outside that some of those leagues are taking a deep breath and coming back and just kind of reevaluating their situation, because I think what's happened in the past is this sense of panic starts to come over some of these leagues, and they make some really questionable decisions, in my view, on expansion.
Well, and you just kind of went through that panic, no panic situation.
Yeah, it was tough
with the conference. I mean, it's. Do you feel like, and you guys talk about it every day, it's like if somebody doesn't do something, that they've made a mistake. And
yeah, in sports, like I think a lot of my job is to try to strip the emotion out of a decision, whether it's about a coach, whether it's about an employee, whether it's about conference expansion, all those kind of things. So if I can go somewhere and strip away the emotion of the moment, and then kind of get a balance, then I think that I personally make much better decisions. And what I don't see are some of my colleagues. I don't see that really happening. It's been kind of fire from the hip kind of mentality, and that's what happened a little bit last year. I think that the rapture was such a fear that and the fan bases are pounding on you saying, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" That it sort of creates a bad circle, and I think some really questionable decisions get made. Not necessarily at the Power 5 level, but kind of at the Group of 5 level is what I'm really referencing.
yeah, and Hut, you and Chase, and kind of pick up on what Joe said, that he wants to see football. And the G5 football is out there. It's been good when you talk about the Sun Belt, Conference USA, the WAC, the Mountain West, and so you've got all of that going on, and there's some shifting going around there. But, it's you guys help fight a mentality sometimes. Well, if you're not in that top 4 in the playoffs, what good are you? And there's a lot of good football being played.
Well, good football, and especially at the highest level, guys. SEC, like we'll start at the very top. They eat their own.
Oh yeah.
I was talking with Mark Stoops today. He's the second longest tenured head coach in the SEC right now.
That's crazy.
And Bear Bryant didn't last as long at Kentucky as Mark Stoops will after they kicked the football off in his 10th season this year. It's bizarre, and the storylines continue to churn because Chip's right. It's playoff or bust. It's win your division or bust. And now all the chatter is about stability. And so if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, but you're a Power 5 and not a Group of 5, you're looking around going, what is my university doing to make sure that we're insured that 5 years from now we're still at the level we are? Meanwhile, the Group of 5, there's stability there. They don't have to look around and wonder where they're going to be. Right. Nick Saban can talk all he wants to about, man, he talks out of both sides of his mouth. He doesn't like NIL, but he brags about $3 million because he's looking out for the little guy because it's not good for college football. He's not worried about MTSU, Western Kentucky, or anyone. But honestly, we Blue Raider fans or anyone in the Group of 5 should not be worried about what Saban is saying either, because they're not speaking about the level of football we're talking about. It is a much bigger business, whereas I think the Group of 5 can be more about the business of football, to Joe's point.
Chaser?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Because if I'm a team like Middle, obviously there's always going to be uncertainty. But I look at my position and I think, hey, you know what? Focus on playing games. Focus on getting people out to Floyd Stadium. It's a great place to watch a game. Joe and I were talking about that earlier. Of you go and it's affordable. You go and watch a football game and just kind of enjoy it. The thing that I'd like to see with the Group of 5, and I do think we're going to get to this point with the Power 5 or Power 2 or whatever it's going to be, they're going to crown their own champion eventually. I'd like to see, a Group of 5 champion. We see it in high school football all the time of having different divisions of champion. I think college football is probably going that direction, or college sports is probably going in that direction. Outside of just Division I, Division II, Division III, things like that. Because I think teams like Middle and Conference USA deserve to be able to compete for some sort of national championship like that.
Let me add to this. So I'm a contrarian when it comes to all this. Again, they're going to swallow themselves, do all that stuff, but You got a coach who's been here 17 years. You got an AD who's been here 17 years. I mean, stability, and winning programs. I sat in my house and watched every damn second of the Bahama Bowl. Every second. Lived and died on every play. Cursed the TV when I thought they'd come back and win. The CBI. I watched all the game. I mean, it's about pride. So at some point, there becomes pride in the university. I went to MTSU twice. First time I was terrible. Got out, got married, went through the life, came back, took 67 hours in a year and graduated from middle. And I'm proud to be an MTSU
in one
graduate.
year?
Yeah.
67 hours?
You're talking spring, summer, fall, and spring. So the year.
Oh, okay.
So give me a little leeway there.
Gotcha.
So I spent a lot of time there. So I'm proud of what the school has and what it has to offer. So they can talk football, and Hutton had a great point. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State's going to be there. I don't want to see that anymore. Give me some pure football. I mean, let me watch basketball. The tennis program goes on, has a great. There's great things at the university. At some point, pride comes into all this, and I don't care what goes on in Knoxville. I hope they're successful, but to a place that's in your backyard that you spent time at, you spent money, and you know people, you know the coaches and the staff, it means so much more than just what are we going to do down the road, this and that. I live for the moment. I can't wait for the home games. And no, coach said they got 5 games at home. But the basketball program on the upswing, baseball's doing good, tennis is doing good. That's pride. To see all that. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools can't offer that. They got coaches leaving every 2 or 3 years. They don't know what's going on. They can't name their coaching staff. And here you can. It's a prideful thing to watch middle grow and be what it is and not get lost in that dogfight out there in the world.
Chris, do you see a possibility of what they talked about, where there's another level of national championship in there somewhere?
It could. One of the big questions is that right now in the CFP, the group of fives gets an $80 million share, and then it's divided through the 5 leagues.
Which is not to be sneezed at.
Yeah, so I think the economics of that have to be addressed at some point in time, and I can see this happening. I see this, if there is this great consolidation at the top, which I've always kind of thought could happen, then the second cut of teams is where we need to be, and I think there's an appetite for real college athletics and those kind of things. So let's just say this team in the ACC gets left out, and this team in the ACC is not in it, and the American's not in it, and those kind of things. And that's the second group. That's the group that I think that we want to be in, and then you can make that happen. The one thing that I worry about too is everything's football, because that drives it. But I, as a sports fan, man, I'm scared to death for the NCAA basketball tournament. I am scared to death when you hear about some of the commissioners talking about, well, maybe we shouldn't have as many automatic berths and those kind of things, and we just take the 64 top-ranked teams instead of have these automatic bids out of these leagues. And to me, that's what's made basketball and college athletics great. So I worry about. It's sort of been set aside right now because everybody's talking about, expansion in football and those kind of things. But I think it would be a tragedy on the American sports front if we messed with the NCAA basketball tournament, because that thing is special.
I'll tell you this, Chris. If you mess with the NCAA tournament, you got a big problem, because we all love a Cinderella. I think everybody in here remembers beating Michigan State and what that was like. I'll never forget Chip's call on that and talking to Coach Davis after that. And I work with a Michigan State guy who even was like, hey, you know what? They deserved it. That was awesome. But you don't get those moments. If you do just the 64 like you're talking about, and not have those automatic bids and some of these Cinderella stories, it takes away the best drama that we have in sports that really to this point hasn't been touched all that much over the years.
I do think, though, if we're talking at the Middle Tennessee level, there must be some forward thinking in this, because that is exactly what Kevin Warren and Greg Sankey are doing. They have referenced too often that the college football playoff contract that Chris referenced ends in 2025. So the $80 million split that they were negotiating, trying to expand the playoff in January. Now Sankey is saying, you know what? Whatever we were trying to compromise on is off the table. It's back to the drawing board. No more automatic bids if we expand to 12. I'll wait until the contract expires, and I'll get what I want anyway, because they're aligned with ESPN, and they're dictating the college football playoff. I buy into, if you guys are a flat earther or something, I'll listen to you, because I like conspiracy theories. And I think, I am a true believer that ABC, Disney, ESPN, however you want to quantify this, they are trying to get their own version and business, because they're already making a ton of money off the college football playoff. It's the one championship where Mark Emmert doesn't hand out the trophy. Bill Hancock hands out the trophy because the NCAA doesn't run it. The vast majority of their budget comes from the college basketball tournament, and they, according to 2021 tax reports, they made a little over $1 billion total in profit, and 73% of that came from the NCAA tournament. ESPN and ABC aren't stupid, and as Sankey and Warren continue to figure out how large they want these conferences to be, when it comes time to negotiate that contract, and if they don't get what they want, it's open bidding. They'll branch off and have their own national champion, and who can argue if they crown anyone from the Big Ten or the SEC as the college football national champion to whoever is left for the picking in the rest of the group. College basketball tournament, you better believe ESPN would go head-to-head with CBS and Turner, who owns the rights to that bracket and March Madness. And CBS allowed Turner into the deal because they couldn't afford to keep it and allow it to go to ESPN when it was last up for bid. So ESPN's a big factor behind all this.
All right.
I was going to say, the one downfall of man throughout history is greed, right? I mean, you go back, greed throughout history is the downfall. So what point does this all just stop? And that's why I go back to what's in our backyard. I mean, if I'm in Clarksville and I'm in Austin P, I'm going to Austin P games. If I'm in Cookeville, I'm going to Tennessee Tech. If I'm in Middle Tennessee, I'm going to Middle Tennessee. At some point, people are going to get sick and tired of all this nonsense and just go back to where they're playing just football. Just take me to MTSU this weekend and watch them play TSU. I mean, that's what I think it's going. That's what I'm going to do. You can get lost in the business world, but Hutton makes a great point. He's talking about that, but nowhere on the line do we talk about playing the game. It's all about money. After a while, it just gets old, really old.
How can that be managed? And we'll go back to what I think it was Joe that said, or whoever said it earlier, that talked about Nick Saban earlier today, that he's bragging about the $3 million or whatever, but says, well, we don't want that to be, don't want that to affect recruiting. How does that not?
Well, and that's been the argument from the get-go, and why NIL never existed until basically the courts and the public pressure and everything existed, because I think people inside athletics knew it's a Pandora's box. It's interesting to me, if you look over the history of NCAA legislation, that what the big boys will do is they'll talk about, well, we shouldn't have legislation about leveling the playing field. And I think I agree with that for the most part. But when they talk about leveling the playing field, I think most of those rules that were put in, and I remember in my early career where they're talking about media guides and how much color you could have in them and how big they could be and all these regulations. Well, that wasn't to give Middle Tennessee a chance. That regulations were put in to protect everybody from Texas. And to protect everybody from the rich. And so South Carolina, where I was at, they were all for that. I mean, because, man, if we can bring Florida back a scale or two, then we've got a more fair of a fight. And I think that what's been lost here a little bit is some of those schools have kind of lost that focus of wanting to fight above their weight class, so to speak. And with these rules, it's just going to be the superpowers have the real advantage in the NIL game. And we're seeing that play out in recruiting and those kind of things. It does give a school an opportunity to build quickly. And you see the rumors, the $1 million quarterbacks and these collectives and how much money everybody's got in their war chest and those kind of things. So it's happening, and players are putting themselves in the portal just to see what their value is, and not necessarily they're unhappy or those kind of things, but it's sort of like sending that resume out, and seeing if you can get a job offer. And so that's what's happening. I think the biggest difference between us and the pros is there are regulating factors. In the pros, you have a players' union, you've got some league agreements, you've got the collective bargaining. Until some of that stuff happens, we're in for a couple years of this wild, wild west, whether the Congress acts or there's some sort of collective bargaining and those kind of things. And I think you're going to see a lot more group licensing happen. Like I'm surprised we haven't seen it yet with like having the SEC quarterbacks have kind of a group licensing and those kind of things. And I think you'll see that more in the leagues when Greg Sankey says something about taking the NIL and having more control of it. I kind of read, well, maybe the SEC will start producing video games and doing the group licensing and all that, so they kind of keep all that money internal. And so that's kind of where I see that going at the higher level.
Yep. Guys, you got to take on that.
Yeah. So
you perked up over there, Hut.
They, it's bad when Lane Kiffin complains about it. Like that tells you the separation, and that's just within their own conference. And we're talking about the Southeastern Conference, and Lane Kiffin's complaining about not having enough money. Brian Kelly was asked a question this week in Atlanta about whether or not LSU had enough funds to compete at the top level in the SEC. That is absurd when you think about the level of this. And the problem is there's no leadership at the NCAA level because they're afraid of being sued. And it's not based on what was ruled on by the Supreme Court last July or June. It's about the opinion that they wrote after the fact, threatening that if it came back to them moving forward, that there would be further sanctions and they would rule in the same favor, hypothetically. So that's why the NCAA they took a step back, and that's why Greg Sankey is running college football in a way. He and Kevin Warren. And another point on NIL. If you don't, coaches hate this, generally speaking. But if you don't lean into it and accept it and adapt to it, the problem is you will be passed by someone that you lapped a long time ago who embraces this, and 10 years of work that Mark Stoops has put in Lexington, or 17 in Murfreesboro by Stock, goes to the wayside because of the way name, image, likeness is working right now.
Yeah, and it was a slippery slope, and everybody knew it was going to be a slippery slope once it happened, because for years, there was the argument of these young men and women devote their lives to playing these sports. Some don't have time to go get a part-time job. Some come, from families where they don't have that income, and so they deserve to get something out of what they're putting into playing sports, and in turn making money for the university and the conferences, and so they should get a piece of the pie. But the problem is, like you said, now it's the wild, wild west, and that's where now the NCAA, they're kind of trying to figure it all out as they go. The universities, like you, Chris, you're trying to figure it out as you go, because it was just like, all right, here you go, and there's no regulations with it. And how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube now that it's gotten to this point? I mean, the athletes now, especially in the big conferences, I mean, they're going to be telling their kids about, hey, I cleaned up because I got to take advantage of the system.
Joe, can you imagine what your NIL deal would have been like when you played?
Here's the deal. So I
Slick
played
Pig Barbecue right here.
I played in the late 80s, and so the idea of making money off playing, when I was at Sanford, the idea, my thing about free was we got to eat free dessert at the training table. We got to eat as much, and to me that was heaven. I'd have played there until I was 60 if I could have eaten free food all the time. But if I'm a player now, I spend time going to auto dealerships, restaurants. Hey, I play for so-and-so. Can you get me on here? Give me a part of a deal. I'll take care of you. Here's a problem I had. Last year, there was a football player for Tennessee, Alontae Taylor, who was endorsed by a cookie store or something. He promised if you got an interception, everybody gets a free cookie. Who's to say late in the game, fourth quarter, Tennessee's up by 3 points. They throw a bomb. He wants the interception, but going for interception, he commits pass interference. Other team wins the game. Did he put his sponsorship above his ability to win the game? I mean, is that so? You got to, I don't envy what Coach Stock has to do. It's really difficult now because, again, are you going to yell at a guy too much? If you hurt his feelings, I'm going to transfer portal because Coach Stock yelled at me. Hey, I'd love Coach Stock to yell at me. It means he cares, right? That's what I want. So you got all this that's going on. So if you ask a guy who played football in the 80s and 90s in college, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy about what these kids are going through today. I don't blame the kids at all for getting the deals. I don't blame them at all. But at the same point, I mean, you got a scholarship. You get to go to school. You're getting education. A lot of people would love that. So I'm on the other side.
There will be a regression back to the mean. It's going to take a couple of years, but I think regulation's coming. The big commissioners have gone to Capitol Hill. They've met with senators like Marsha Blackburn and then the other side of the aisle as well. And what they're trying to determine is, can there be federal legislation when there is state legislation on an individual basis? If Sankey and Warren don't get the federal legislation quickly, they're going to go to the governors that are home to their schools. And I think we will see, it'll soon be 12 states that will partner together in some way that will have some semblance of regulation to it. I think that factors in. The other part where I think it comes back to the mean is how many of these deals right now where the players don't actually get what was promised to them. And normally in a contract, in a CBA, something like that, where you have a much larger organization on your behalf ensuring that you're going to get what you're promised when you go to that school, I think the players will fall back to, you know what, regulation's not such a bad thing either, and there will be some unity behind, okay, here's a guardrail for us as we move forward, because it's not going away. It's completely out of the box.
So let me add this. Say I own a business. I signed Hutton to this massive deal. He's my quarterback. But
Congrats.
in fall camp, yeah, way to go, Jonathan, he gets beaten out. He's now number 2. Do I go to Chris Massaro and say, hey, I signed Hutton for $1 million. Do you mind? I mean, this looks bad on me, and I try to blame the AD for this. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities going to happen with what's going on there. So I don't know. There's plenty of answers. There's no solutions. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan, I think the scenario you painted is somewhat realistic, but I don't see it happening in Congress. And what people tell me is that, and Tom McMillan, and who's head of our Athletic Directors Association, and some of the commissioners and those kind of things, is the philosophical divide, even on this issue between the Republicans and Democrats, is really wide. And the Democrats want a lot more of the health care benefits and those kind of things tossed in there. And so there's a lot of battleground there. And quite honestly, that from their perspective, those are kind of tough issues and vote losers.
Chip,
in a lot of ways. So I think the governor scenario might be a more realistic view. I don't think there's a lot of hope from our chairs, from the 130 chairs, that Congress is going to act anytime soon. And definitely with the midterm elections coming up,
yeah, no doubt.
There's no chance right now. So maybe eventually, but there's got to be some sort of regulation from either Congress or collective bargaining or state governments.
So we're all waiting on the next domino in conference realignment, which is Notre Dame. Whatever they do will dictate what happens next, if they stay independent or if they join a conference. The next domino for all of this is who replaces Mark Emmert. That is a massive hire, and it is bizarre to me that I have not heard one single name floated out there as his successor. That tells you how difficult of a position that is, and how innovative the new person needs to be compared to the guy that's leaving. Have you heard a name? Do you have any idea who they're looking at to replace him?
No, and what we've been told is now that they're doing an executive committee that will convene like in September, to figure out the process first, and so it's higher ed at its finest.
Well, are we to the point, Chris, of where instead of one NCAA person? Are we to the point where we
I
need
think that-
a college football commissioner, a college basketball czar?
I think that's going to be the general direction. Whether that happens at this stage or not, that's going to be really hard. I think that Jonathan's very right that it's going to depend on the quality of candidate that you might get, you know, and there are names that are being tossed around, and I don't know levels of interest, like from Condoleezza Rice to President Schultz, who's the president of Washington State, and some of these, and right away, a lot out of the gate, some of them have denied interest, but we all learn that maybe that's a way to kind of keep it going. So that's a big hire, and I'm not sure. There's nobody, I would say, out of the 130-some ADs and FBS, I don't think any of us are really looking to the NCAA for the solution.
Who wants that job? I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, somebody will. You know, one of the greatest things Archie Manning
A leader would want that job.
well, they're hard to find
someone,
these days.
But someone like there will be a clear candidate normally that would step forward and take over, and everyone's behind. I don't think it's some president currently sitting at a university that we've never heard of either. I think it's got to be someone in business, someone that has been around the sports game that you're like, you know what, this is outside the box, but yet they can connect to different sports, different businesses, different political parties. That's the candidate that you have to have, and they'd be voted in a heartbeat. But it's very difficult in this day and age to be an independent person. You've got to be one side or the other, and therefore those people are hard to vote through.
Well, you look at something like that from an abstract point of view, you know, to take that job on and what it means and what you got to go through. I go back to Archie Manning was on the first playoff committee. What did Archie Manning do? He got off. Why? Because he knew exactly what was going to happen. I don't know a lot of people, we look for leaders all the time who want that job. I mean, you talk what Chris is talking about, all the changing and the money and the director. I mean, I'm just going crazy in my mind here thinking about, I don't want that job, and I don't know anybody, but somebody will step up. But we're talking all this stuff. We're not even talking about the game, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
We've
and here,
lost sight of the game.
It's exactly. It's the lack of talking about, you know, who's the, you know, backup left tackle.
Right.
You know, that kind of conversation is being missed because of these overarching issues.
Well, and I think it's a lot of it too is that the big shoes to drop have historically been in the summer. You know, last year it was Oklahoma and Texas. This year, you know, and it's no coincidence. Once we start playing games, it kind of dies down. You know, last year it ran rampant through the group of five, but at the Power Five level, once they started playing games, I mean, the Big 12 kind of solidified itself, and some of the focus was gone. So I think that this desert of information just kind of fuels this little bit of hysteria on what the future is going to be.
You guys work in the media every day, and Chris's job, Mark Owen's job, are trying to find ways to gain notoriety, get the piece of the pie as far as the media things and everything that's out there, whether it's being a guest on one of your shows or callers calling in, wanting to talk about what's going on at Middle. When you see headlines like, for instance, now with the Bill Blue project going on, and you see $100 million being invested into facilities, or what are the stories like that gain traction with your audience?
Well, I mean, if we're being honest, I'm looking at can I discuss what I mentioned to you?
Sure.
So I don't know how long it was last summer when Vandy put out that press release that $300 million set aside now for athletics out of the blue. I have not seen one shovel or hard hat on any picture. So the minute they break ground on this facility after the football season, you better believe I will be shouting that to the moon that Middle is way ahead of Vanderbilt on getting and delivering on any promise they make on behalf of their fan base. Like that's the story to me is, you know what, we're invested in the community and we're invested in our alumni base and our current students, along with our student athletes, and it means something to us. And here's the money behind it to prove that we're invested in making a game day experience, whether it's basketball at the Murphy Center or Floyd Stadium or any part of campus. We're going to make it the best the best advantage for you to come instead of stay on the couch and flip through and see what quarter we're in on CBS Sports Network. That's the next level, is making sure you can tell a fan when you come to the game, you're going to have a better overall time with your family than staying at home and watching all the games. That's the biggest challenge in it.
What's going to draw that conversation on Darren, Donick, and Chase?
Well, I mean, we talk about facilities a lot on our show. And I mean, because Nashville has this moniker as the it city, you know, Middle Tennessee being the place to be. And so whether we're talking about, you know, building a new Titan Stadium or you mentioned Vandy, what Middle is doing to improve their facilities. I mean, it's something that comes up almost on a daily basis because we live in such a fast-paced society now that it's like, hey, you got to keep up with it. And I also, you know, from Chris's side of things, it's not cheap to keep up with it. I mean, you walk into your house and you go, you know what? I want to move this wall over here, and I want to get new furniture here, and I want to paint in this room. You can't do it all in one day. I mean, you got to plan for it. You got to save up for it. There are things that you have to do to finally complete that project. And so everybody knows that it takes time and it takes money. But what I love what MTSU has done, I mean, the school I went to and graduated from 10 years ago is a very different looking school now because they're constantly growing and they're constantly renovating and building new buildings. And athletics is no different because you know that with this ever-changing game, you got to keep up with it. And so we talk about that stuff all the time. And you made a great point, Hut, about shovels aren't in the ground in other places, and Middle's doing it and has announced a plan, and now you're seeing that plan executed, which is what they want to see, those results.
Prime example, Chase and I spent 10 minutes, I don't know if you saw because we were eating cookies, but we
were feeding each other.
They didn't want to get too close.
Well, yeah, so you got the rendering there of what it's going to look like. So we spent 10 minutes like, Chase, like, I had a class in Murphy Center. I had a class in Murphy. I fell down on the ice one time. I mean, so you start remembering, you start bringing back some good things, and you see we all love progress. So we spent 10 minutes discussing, my God, look how beautiful this is, and it's in the works. It's not somewhere that we're dreaming it, some Peter Pan episode. It's happening.
Yep.
So for us to spend there that long and laugh about our time at Middle and how good it looked, to me, that is worth every penny.
All right, what you three guys, kind of a little rapid fire here. What has you excited about the 2022 Blue Raider football season?
Talking to Coach Stockwood, interview, his excitement. You know, here's a coach 17 years here, and he's more excited than he is today than he was when he got the job. So that rubs off on us. It comes through. It's a word I had discovered in the last few years. Palpable means you can touch it and feel it, right? So we didn't do that during COVID, but I could feel his excitement. So that fires me up.
I'll say this, and Joe knows this. The first show I was ever on was called the Game Blitz, high school football show. And there was a kid we talked about on Friday nights named Brent Stockstill that did a lot of things at Siegel, and seeing him now as a part of Coach Stock's coaching staff, just watching him ascend. I mean, I get excited about stuff like that because I can relate to it. Like, hey, I remember when you were playing high school football, I was starting my radio career, but I echo what Joe says too. I mean, seeing, Stock and I got to Middle at the same time and seeing what he's done with that program 17 years later, I mean, it's awesome.
I mean, what excites me is winning. I mean, I want to win. We all want to win. But in the media, the average fan, I don't know if we see the sport the same way. For instance, when growing up, I'm a massive fan of multiple teams. And covering the teams now, I'm not a fan of much of anything. I root more for storylines than I do a result on a scoreboard. And Middle gives me the opportunity to actually root for a team in a university. And I don't root for any other team. I don't care what happens at Nissan Stadium as long as it's going to make for a great media product that night or the next day. I mean, that's what you want. You want eyeballs on our product. And so what happens on game day, you're going to react to it one way or the other. At Middle, I get to show up with my wife, the in-laws, the nephews, and we have a great game day experience without an upper deck view. I mean, that's the other thing. I think the toughest ticket in sports from Nissan to the SEC is selling an upper deck football ticket right now. And there's no upper deck at Middle after this renovation is done, unless you were going to sit in the Coach Stock's air-conditioned office on a hot September day. That's it. Like, So I'm there for back to Joe's point, I'm there for the football and actually being a fan for that 4 hours.
I'm also the most excited about listening to Chip Walters on
there you
102.5
go.
The Game.
Thank you.
So there's that.
I appreciate it.
So, Chip, I know you asked those three, and those were all
you
great
were
answers. Okay. Tennessee State at home. That really excites me because I think playing locally has tremendous value. And then those four guys that came to Nashville tonight, man, they're great. And they're great off the field, on the field. And that's what excites me. And I wish you could take those stories and take them to every doorstep of every alum and let Jordan Ferguson talk to them. And if Ferg talks to them and they see the quality and character of our football team exemplified by those four leaders, I think people will really come in a big way.
Speaking of that home opener, September 17th, Tennessee State coming to town. We're here in Nashville. We got a former Titan coaching Tennessee State. We got Kevin Byard over here, a current Titan. There should be some sort of nice little bet going on there, don't you think?
That can easily be done. That's already done, and we haven't talked it into existence yet.
It has nothing to do with the NIL.
Trust me, Eddie's all for that. So if you want to make it about NIL, they'll do it. Byard is a great example of, a guy in our community that's gone on to reflect us through a mirror. It's a reflection of every Blue Raider fan out there. I love what he's doing. He'll do anything, and so will Eddie, for that matter, for TSU and playing into the local aspect.
Oh, yeah, because I feel like Kevin Byard has been a game changer for you all just because he's a heck of a football player, but he stayed true. He stayed true blue. I mean, that's what he's done. It would have been very easy for him to sign the big contract, be this big star, and worry about that. But he has. I mean, he has the moniker, the mayor of Murfreesboro, that you hear Mike Keith call whenever he does something big. And that shows you the kind of man he is at the same time of how he can give it all back. And I think that's really cool.
Let's just get a big crowd. I mean, Saturday is the game at night.
Yes, 6 o'clock.
Well, this is the stadium record crowd, right? It's still this.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah, so I'm expecting a massive crowd.
Yeah, let's tailgate, have a good time. Everybody go to the game and have fun and watch two area programs in our backyard play. I mean, that's what it's all about. And that game, we're not going to talk about, oh my God, so-and-so NIL money. We're talking football, You're calling a football game, Chip. I mean, I'll see Chris on the sidelines where he shouldn't be cheering on the team, but we'll enjoy that. I mean, that's what college football is, man. It's that Saturday. I'll take college football every day, any day over any NFL game. That's just the way I am.
And you said the word local. My owner, Bud Walters, for 102.5 The Game, I was just in managers' meetings this week.
My Uncle Bud.
Yes. Was preaching local. And that's what is so cool about a matchup with MTSU and TSU is just to have those two local programs that people can talk about. You best believe we will be talking about that quite a bit that week.
All right. Want to thank these guys for being here tonight. Jonathan, first of all, tell folks how they can get with you, listen to the show, watch the show.
Oh, you can watch the show wherever you stream video. Just search out OutKick 360. What I would prefer you do is if you're in your car, set your preset to 94.9 The Fan. It was 94.9 Game 2. Chase, thankfully.
I brought him back to Nashville radio, so there's that.
A month and a half to 2 months in, Chase was like, we were in New York, having more beers than what we had right here.
About to say, it could have been beer involved.
Like, so far.
Yeah, you want back on? I'm like, yeah, well, we would love to be on in Nashville. We need to get this done. And we got it done. So we're on, again, live 2 to 5 p.m. here on 94.9 The Fan, which is also the home of plenty of programming.
95.1 in Murfreesboro.
95.1, yeah.
And home of Blue Raider basketball.
Right.
Chaser, tell them about the DDC.
You can hear me 10 to 2 weekdays with Darren McFarland, Willie Donick. We also have former Titan Derek Mason that jumps in every now and then. And, we have a great lineup of shows with Robbie and Rexroad, our morning show, and Stillman and Company. You can boo Jared, it's fine. With Caroline Fenton as well as our afternoon show. But we love working with MTSU. They've been with us pretty much since the beginning. And so we were excited to have Blue Raider football back on our air this year.
Football on the game, 102.5 and 97.5 in Murfreesboro, 106.3 on
106.3 as well. Yeah.
And,
so you can hear us everywhere.
Yep. Now, Joe, mornings on Main Street.
So I'll make this easy. If you want to watch, just tap your heart. I'm always there. Okay? That's simple.
All right. Give these guys a nice round of applause and thank them for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.